Welcome to Anatomy Review for the integumentary system. The skin, or integument or cutaneous membrane, as all of those terms are synonymous, is about 22 square feet in surface area. It weighs about 10 or 11 pounds, which is usually, if you take the average weight of an adult, and that can vary so much, the average body weight of an average adult is about 70% of that body weight. It is the largest organ in the body, and it consists of skin, hair, oil, sweat glands, nails, and sensory receptors. Functions of skin include protection, body temperature regulation, cutaneous sensation. It synthesizes vitamin D and serves as a blood reservoir. There are two major regions to the skin: the outer epidermis, very thin superficial layer composed of epithelial tissue, and the inner dermis, which is the thicker layer just deep to the dermis. It's mostly connective tissue. Then not one of the skin regions, but an area under the skin is called hypodermis. That's it's subcutaneous, it's mostly fat, and it attaches the skin to the underlying fascia. Here you see a cross-section of skin with some of the organs of skin labeled. There may be a few missing, but these are the major organs of the skin. Let's look at the epidermis a little more closely. It consists of keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. It is avascular, meaning no vascular supply. And there are four basic types of cells that we find here. Keratinocytes, which are responsible for that tough protein called keratin, gives skin its waterproofing and protective properties. Melanocytes, which produce the pigment melanin and give skin its color. It protects the skin from damaging UV radiation. Darker skin has more melanin. Epidermal dendritic or Langerhans cells are macrophages, so they work with the immune system. And then there are tactile or Merkel cells, which serve as touch receptors. In most regions, there are only 4 layers of epidermis, but where we have increased friction, such as the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, there will be a 5th layer. So let's look at these layers. The deepest layer, where the epidermis originates from a single row of rapidly dividing stem cells, is called the stratum basale, or the basal layer. The next layer up from that is about 8 to 10 layers thick. We've got some pre-keratin filaments here, stratum spinosum. Then up from that, the stratum granulosum. It's about 3 to 5 cell layers thick. This is where keratinization begins, and nuclei and organelles of these cells begin to die. So up to this point, cells in the epidermis are alive, they have all their organelles, and they are quite full-bodied. The stratum lucidum is starred here because we only find this in thick skin. The fingertips, the palms, and the soles has more keratin and a thickened plasma membrane to make it more tough. But in all other areas of the body, we just have the outer layer, the stratum corneum. It's the most superficial layer. It's about 20 to 30 layers of flattened, dead keratinocytes. So by now, these cells have lost all their organelles. They're basically dead skin cells. And they provide an effective water-repellent barrier. And then here are the layers labeled for you so you can kind of get a sense for their orientation. Just deep to the epidermis is the dermis. Very strong, flexible connective tissue. There's a lot of collagen and elastic fibers here. Lots of blood vessels, nerves, glands, and hair follicles. In fact, the epidermis gets its nutrition from the blood vessels here, and that basal layer really gets its nourishment from these blood vessels. The cells we would find here would be fibroblasts, macrophages, and then occasional mast cells and white blood cells. Skin color. So there are 3 pigments that contribute to skin color. One we're pretty familiar with, melanin, produced by melanocytes. This results in the more melanin you have, the darker the skin will be. Number of melanocytes, though, is generally the same in all people. It's just how much melanin is produced will determine skin color. Highly concentrated areas of melanin would be like freckles or moles. Another pigment to skin would be carotene. It's kind of yellowish to orange. You see more of that on the palms and the soles. And then, of course, hemoglobin from your blood capillaries will give skin its pinkish hue, and as we know, when there is a flushed skin, we have more redness. Otherwise, skin does just have a pinkish hue anyway. Albinism is an inherited inability of a person to produce melanin, and then vitiligo is partial or complete loss of the melanocytes. It usually results later in life and it results in irregular white spots. Let's look at some appendages of the skin. So like I said, hair, nails, and glands are all part of the skin. We're going to look at hair, nail, and look at the different kinds of glands there, sweat glands and oil glands. So let's take a look at sweat glands first, also called sudoriferous glands. There are two main types, eccrine or merocrine glands. Sweat glands are found in the palms, soles, and forehead in great abundance. They function in thermoregulation. They produce a clear, watery, odorless secretion. This is what we call true sweat. And there are about 3 million of these per person, so they're the most numerous. We have apocrine sweat glands in more concentrated areas, the axillary and anogenital areas. These don't function until puberty, and they secrete a slightly viscous, maybe milky to yellowish in color secretion that has a little bit more of an odor. There are far fewer of these, about 2,000 per person. Some specialized glands, ceruminous glands are found in the ear. They produce cerumen or earwax. They're modified apocrine glands. And then mammary glands produce milk. They're considered later with the reproductive system. Next would be oil or sebaceous glands. These mostly develop from hair follicles. So you'll see these attached to hair follicles. They help keep the hair sort of slick and lubricated, keeps it from becoming brittle, and also can slow water loss from the skin when humidity is low. They're found all over the body except in thick skin and the palms and soles. Very small number on the body's trunk and limbs. Larger on the face, neck, and upper chest. Again, they secrete sebum, that is oil. And again, these are stimulated by hormones, especially androgens at puberty. So not as active in children, more active after puberty. And then acne would be a condition in which there is inflammation of a sebaceous gland and it causes a pustule or pimple. Hair, another appendage, functions to alert the body to the presence of insects on the skin before they bite or sting. It also guards the scalp against physical trauma, heat loss, and sunlight. The distribution would be most skin surfaces except the palms, soles, lips, nipples, and portions of the external genitalia. The hair follicle itself is located deep in the dermis. Again, sebaceous glands connect to hair follicles and secrete sebum into the hair shaft to nourish and lubricate the hair. Erector pili are smooth muscles that are attached to hair follicles that can make hair stand on end or give a person goosebumps. And then also nerve endings are attached to these hair follicles because everyone knows when their hair is blowing or when something has touched you and bent those hairs, you will feel it. So here's a picture of a hair follicle deep in the dermis. Very similar anatomical structure to the epidermis, almost a continuation as the hair is formed similarly to the way our skin cells are formed. Hair itself consists of dead keratinized cells, just like our outer layer of epidermis. In the hair we have very hard keratin, a lot more durable than the soft keratin of skin. There are pigments here, just like in the skin, melanins, that result in hair colors. We get yellow, rust, brown, and black. Gray and white hair is a result of decreased melanin production and maybe increased air bubbles in the shaft. Red hair is due to an iron-containing pigment called trichocerdin. We see that in very small numbers of the population. Alopecia is hair loss or thinning, and it is a normal part of the aging process. Hair grows fastest from teen years to 40s, and then it slows down. Nails are another appendage. They're scale-like modifications of the epidermis on the distal dorsal surface of fingers and toes. They're very useful as tools. They help pick up small objects or scratch an itch. And if you ever cut your fingernails too short and then you have an itch, you find that it's just not adequate. They contain very hard keratin, much like the hair. They appear pink due to rich bed capillaries in the underlying dermis, and changes in nails can help diagnose certain conditions. We won't get into that here, but there are a lot of different health conditions that present as different deformities or different presentations in the fingernails. Functions of the integumentary system, I think I touched on these in the beginning, but let's go into them a little more in depth. Again, protection. Skin is a protective barrier. There is a chemical barrier or acid mantle aspect to the skin. The low pH helps to inhibit bacterial growth. The physical or mechanical barrier of skin is due to keratin. It gives skin hardness and waterproofs it. And then there are biological barriers that are really the function of the immune system, like dendritic cells, macrophages, and DNA. Skin helps regulate body temperature through perspiration or vice versa through shivering. And then cutaneous sensations. The skin gives us cutaneous sensations, touch, temperature, pain, to name a few. There are metabolic functions of skin like synthesizing vitamin D, chemically converting carcinogens and some hormones. It is a blood reservoir, so up to 5% of the body's blood volume can be stored here. And it is an excretory organ, so nitrogenous waste and salt and sweat are released through the pores, sweat pores in the skin. So let's conclude by talking about one homeostatic imbalance. I bring this one up because 1 in 5 Americans develop skin cancer. I got this information from the CDC website and from a textbook. Most skin tumors are benign and do not metastasize. And risk factors for skin cancer include overexposure to UV radiation, frequent irritation of the skin. According to the CDC, it is the most common form of cancer in the United States, and these statistics refer only to melanomas. There are really 3 kinds of skin cancer we'll cover. Melanoma would be the most dangerous of the 3, and this data relates to melanoma. So in 2014, 76,665 people in the U.S. were diagnosed with melanoma of the skin, and 9,324 died from melanoma of the skin. It is the most dangerous form of skin cancer. So here are the 3 types of skin cancer: basal cell carcinoma, melanoma, and squamous cell carcinoma. Basal cell is the least malignant and most common. Squamous cell is the second most common, and then melanoma, least common, thank goodness, because it is the most dangerous. It can grow quickly and metastasize. So on melanoma, we can characterize any skin lesion, and this is very important because of melanoma, by the ABCD rule. So we look at A, which is asymmetry. If the 2 sides of the pigmented area do not match, that we would call that asymmetrical. We look at the border if it exhibits indentations. We look at the color. Is it black, brown, tan, or maybe red or blue? We look at the diameter. If it's larger than 6 millimeters, that's significant. And if I back up and show you the picture of melanoma again, you can see all of those characteristics. It has asymmetry. It's not perfectly round. It has a irregular border. It has some very dark and irregular coloring, and we can't tell the size of this particular melanoma from this picture. Another condition of skin is burns. They can be caused by heat, electricity, radiation, or certain chemicals. All of these things can cause a burn, which is tissue damage. Tissue damage can denature proteins and cause cell death. From burns, the immediate threat is catastrophic loss of body fluids, which we would call dehydration. And then electrolyte imbalance would then ensue. This leads to renal shutdown and circulatory shocks. That's the first major concern with burns. And then, of course, right there with it is septicemia, because if we do lose that protective barrier, a significant amount of it, then that minimizes the ability of the immune system to protect us, and we can develop septicemia. So moving through the last slides real quickly here because we're running out of time, we can diagnose severity of burns based upon 2 criteria. Rule of 9s has to do with the amount of surface area burn and burn depth, which we're all familiar with: 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree burns. Here's a Lund-Browder chart which breaks the body down into percents, totaling 9%. So they have these in most emergency rooms. Here's a picture showing 1st and 2nd degree burn on the left and a full thickness or 3rd degree burn on the right. Burns are considered critical if more than 25% of the body has a 2nd degree, more than 10% has a 3rd degree, or face, hands, or feet bear 3rd degree burns. And that concludes our presentation.